Today we're going to talk about professionalism and power. We're going to start by looking at the facets that make up classical professions. And when we think of classical professions, we often think of education, medicine, law, clergy, those types of things. The first aspect is access to and input into a codified body of knowledge. This means that you have the scientific knowledge of what makes up that profession, and you also are contributing to it as time goes on. This is often started during the formalized learning and or training for the job or the profession in which you are learning this. So you wouldn't want to go to a doctor that had just learned how to be a doctor on Google, right? You would want to go to a doctor that had formalized learning and training in their specific profession. The third one here is interesting to me, and it is a duty to give back beyond the scope of the work required. So when you think of those classical professions, and you think of doctors, you might think of Doctors Without Borders. So doctors going and volunteering their time in places where people don't have access to medicine, or a lawyer doing something pro bono, meaning they're not charging for their services. And in education, there's often mentoring and work that's done beyond the scope of the job of the classroom that is part of being a professional educator. So we use this word profession a lot, saying I'm a professional dog walker or a professional ice cream scooper. And there's nothing wrong with using the label, but really thinking about what makes someone a professional is important. This will be important when you're measuring your own level of expertise in that portfolio project, utilizing the Dreyfus model. That goes hand in hand with a lot of what we're talking about here today. So back in 1959, French and Raven gave us 5 forms of power to consider, and then added a 6th 6 years later. The first 5 were legitimate, reward, expert, referent, and coercive. So legitimate power is power that a person has that goes along with their job or title. They are given it based on the position that they hold. If a person has reward power, it means that they can give you something because of that position. Sometimes with people with legitimate power also have reward power. Sometimes those are separate. The third one here is expert power. This is power that someone holds because they are an expert in their area. In the communication sciences, it may be as simple as being able to talk your way out of something because you know the communication tools and are well armed in the conversation. Referent power is a little bit different because it's based on respect of the individual. So if you believe I have power because you respect me, that gives me more power because it's referent in nature. So when we think about the importance of reputation and behavior inside of professionalism, this is important. The fifth one goes another direction, and that is coercive power. So coercive power is the ability to punish, and I would say also to not punish, which ties into reward power, but the ability to enact consequences onto someone because of something that they do or don't do. The sixth power that was added is informational power. And just like coercive power, this is the giving of or the holding back of information. So if I have access to information and I'm transparent about what is going on or what's not going on or what we're not sure is going on, I may be using that informational power because I'm in the know and choose to give it. I may also be in the know because of legitimate power or expert power, but choose to withhold it from people to reduce their power. So all of these are important when we're thinking about the obligation to a community in which someone who holds power serves. Now, I have this title, "With great power comes great responsibility," with the name Flipping Maslow. Now, Maslow's hierarchy of needs is likely not a new concept to you. This is taught in many places, discussed in many contexts, and goes back often to early years of education. The physiological, of course, being the things without you would die. So air, water, food. Right? If you don't have these things, you will cease to exist. Just above that is safety. So if you have the things in order to live, do you have a space in which you feel safe? And that can include both your home, getting to your home, in spaces you occupy, at work, etc. Above this are esteem and belongingness. And we could get into a long conversation, and many theorists do, about where these belong on the actual hierarchy. Belongingness is a feeling that you are part of a community. Esteem is how you feel in that community, often by joining organizations and creating relational connections. Both belongingness and esteem evolve. And then the top of Maslow is self-actualization, where you reach your complete self and you are paying attention to your whole self. There is a lot of current debate around this idea of flipping Maslow. And you can find articles titled things like, "Did Maslow get it wrong? What is the manager's responsibility?" And I think this has largely grown out of the space that we're currently in thinking about what does work and professionalism really look like. And this idea that if management focuses on self-actualization, meaning they care about the whole self of the people they employ, supervise, or create administrative functions for, they will care about work-life balance and mental health and all of these other things, which build esteem, creates belongingness, certainly creates safe places at work, and increases the chance that if somebody doesn't feel safe or is lacking in physiological needs, that they will disclose that to the person in the position of power and ask for the help they need. And this is very much the reverse of many conversations that were had in the past of professional people or professions as a whole saying, well, it's not my job to clothe you, feed you, etc. It's my job to employ you and make sure you have the tools you need to be successful there. But we're having a much different conversation now about what this might look like and what the manager of the future is going to be. This brings us to these classical management personalities, and there's a reason why I put this after the discussion of flipping Maslow. So we know that managers tend to fall into one of these four categories classically. It will be interesting as we go on through this course to see if this is evolving, changing, and what you, the managers of the future, will choose to bring into this. So the authoritarian manager is consistent, predictable, and rule-oriented. So you know what to do to please your authoritarian manager because they rule with authority and are very clear about their expectations. This is different than the Machiavellian manager. So Niccolo Machiavelli of The Prince, if you've read that book or you read that book sometime in high school, it's this idea of almost Machiavellian manipulation of a Machiavellian manager gets you to do what they want you to do, but makes you believe that it's what you want to do and it's your idea. Often we talk about this with voluntary compliance in many different areas. When I work with police during trainings and on emotional intelligence, we talk about voluntary compliance, and that is very Machiavellian in nature. The next manager is the achievement-oriented manager. These tend to be the workhorses of the management world. They are often overcommitted, overextended, and maybe even undercompensated. They are the people taking on extra work in order to get the job done. Some of you as students are achievement-oriented, meaning even though you don't like it, you're willing to do extra in order to succeed, which is different, obviously, in a student perspective or a manager perspective. But you are training yourself to become the person that you're going to be as a manager going through this time as a student. The last classical management personality is the dogmatic one. If you are dogmatic in your management style, it means that you have a very narrow view of what is right and what is wrong. It's useless to argue with somebody with a dogmatic management style, and then they can be difficult to work for if you don't agree or you have different values or principles. Because although we sometimes associate dogma with political or religious affiliations, it is that very idea that you are narrow in your definition of what can or should occur in the environment. Lastly, I want to talk about administration versus supervision. And this is important as we move forward and we think about management style, and in the next unit get into handling climate change, culture change, burnout, these types of things. So when you think about the part of your management job or style that is administration, this is keeping things organized and balanced. So I have this picture here of these balls balanced on these wheels. But this idea of being in administration is very much behind the scenes of the actual work. I'm dipping my toe personally into the administrative pool, doing scheduling and stuff for faculty. I actually looked at and I'm going to date mark this video now, but I looked at a bottle of salad dressing this morning that it said it expires in November of 21. And in my mind, I was like, oh, this is expired because I'm currently working on the 22-23 schedule for faculty. That is administration, which has nothing to do with my day-to-day actual job right now, being aware of what month, day, and year it is. But there are administrative parts of your job or that you will delegate out to make sure they are completed. And again, this is going to be important as a baseline when we look at communication trends in the next unit. Versus supervision, which is the frequent contact with your employees and the overseeing of them. So supervising. Now, supervising can be micromanaging. It can be macromanaging. We'll get into that in another lecture, but it is the frequent contact. It's interesting to me that when I teach a class and I teach it fully web versus mixed mode versus face-to-face, the elements are all the same, but the feeling of supervision can be very different. My job doesn't change. The outcomes for the class don't change, but the feeling of being watched or supervised is different person to person. I actually have more tools for supervision in a fully web class. I can see if you've watched this video. I can see how many minutes you watched, if you watched it more than once. I get a lot of analytics versus in a face-to-face lecture, I can't necessarily see if you're daydreaming or paying attention. Now, I also don't know if you're playing this video, but currently in the kitchen making a sandwich. But if you are, you're not hearing this anyway, so it really doesn't matter. But the check-ins that I do in class and the quizzes that you'll have on the videos are a way to supervise your learning. If you're not doing well on the quizzes, I'm going to look and see if you're watching the videos. If you're not watching the videos, it doesn't surprise me that you don't do well in the quizzes. But if you are watching the videos and not doing well in the quizzes, is there another roadblock in the way? Is there a structural issue, a technological issue, a mental roadblock, a societal roadblock? What is going on? And that's part of that supervision and why I do those check-ins. It is a space every week where we have direct contact. You and I, between me, the lecturer, and you, the student. Now, sometimes people just say, all good, checked in, whatever. Other people write me a story, send me a picture of their cat, do all sorts of things. But that's part of properly supervising a class. And part of the profession of education to which I belong. So this is the end of module 1, and the last unit that you will use to take your quiz next week. And then we'll be moving into module 2. After that, we'll start to look at some more contemporary issues.